So, good evening, the participants. Today, I welcome you for this lecture on morphological alterations of canine ECG waveforms and its diagnostic interpretation. You might have taken the ECG number of times in your clinic setup. How will you define the ECG? ECG is a method of measuring, displaying, and recording the electrical activity of the heart. As we all are aware that electrical activity of the heart is more in an orderly manner, synchronized than that of in the brain, because heart has to bring about a single forceful coordinated contraction each time. Now, since the electrical activity of the heart is in an orderly, sequential, and timely manner, each time it consistently produces the identical waveforms or the patterns at regular interval. And now each segment or part of that wave form represents or corresponds to the electrical activity of the particular cardiac region. Now let us see what are the uses of ECG, why we take it out. ECG is a practical, useful diagnostic clinical tool that provides reliable information quickly and easily. ECG helps us to evaluate the cardiac diseases. By analyzing the PQRST waveforms, we can identify the anatomical changes taking place in each compartment of the heart, because there is a corresponding change in the ECG waveform for every chamber enlargement or every chamber anatomical change. Of course, you have a clinical history of the patient, then it is to be correlated with the X-ray and finally confirmed by echocardiography, because ECG is not a panacea. With the help of the stethoscope, you are able to detect the arrhythmias, but you are unable to identify the type of arrhythmia unless you record the ECG of the patient, whether the arrhythmia is of atrial type, ventricular type, or it's just a benign vagal arrhythmia. Because unless you identify the proper the type of arrhythmia, the proper therapy for it cannot be instituted. And the haphazard therapy for arrhythmia is a certain invitation for fatality. Now, once we have identified the arrhythmia or detected the cardiac disease, then a suitable cardiac therapy is suggested, and then the patient has to be followed up for seeing the progress of the disease or the effect of the therapy on the patient. And therefore, ECG helps us to give the progression of the disease or the effect of the therapy on the patient. Also, it gives us the prognosis of the condition so that we can inform the owner accordingly about the fate of the patient. Now, the symptoms like fatigue, lethargy, weakness, collapse, or seizure, they are observed in certain diseases, but they are always seen with the cardiac diseases. And therefore, once we just record one ECG, the cardiac cause is ruled out, so that then you can go in for your other list of differential diagnosis. Then ECG monitoring is highly essential when the patient is observed under anesthesia for the development of any arrhythmias, particularly for the heart rate and heart rhythm. Now, the ECG is also recorded for routine purposes as yearly physicals, then evaluation of the patient prior to the surgery for his cardiac fitness to the anesthesia, then evaluation during the trauma cases. Lastly, documentation of the data. The ECG is a vetro-legal document and therefore has to be saved and stored as a permanent record of the patient's health. and therefore its proper labeling along with the patient's detail and the date and time of its recording is highly essential. According to the Radostitz et al., the heart and blood vessels are the two basic functional units of cardiovascular system. And heart, being a hollow musculomembranous organ, supplies the blood to the entire body with the help of network of blood vessels. Now, since heart is working continuously throughout our lifetime in a sequential and orderly manner, the heart muscles are bestowed upon by 5 important physiological properties. We are just going to study, make a mention of these properties very briefly. Now, these properties are, first is contractility. Contractility is an innate ability of the heart muscle or myocardium to contract. Now, the contractility can increase or decrease, and it is influenced by certain factors like myocardial diseases, cardiomyopathies, degenerations, loading conditions, drugs, poisons, nutritional deficiencies, then catecholamines, etc. So these factors can reduce the myocardial contractility. And when the myocardial contractility becomes, there is a poor, then it compromises the cardiac output or the ejection fraction during each beat, and therefore adversely affecting the hemodynamic balance of the patient's body and leading to the congestive cardiac failure. Second important property is conductivity. It is the property of the heart muscle whereby the activation of an individual muscle cell produces activity in the neighboring cell. All the cardiac muscle cells are electrically linked to one another by the structures called as gap junctions. And these are protein-lined tunnels and allow direct transmission of the depolarizing current from cell to cell. These gap junctions are the proteins of connexin family that form the pore through which the ions like sodium, calcium, and potassium, they pass. Now, since potassium is available intracellularly more, mainly it passes through. And once it passes to the another cell, it increases the membrane potential slightly, activating the sodium channels, and the action potential results. Now, if you consider a heart, it is a true anatomic syncytium. Syncytium is network. And the cardiac muscle cell physiology operates on the functional syncytium principle. That is, when one cell is stimulated, all cells will get automatically stimulated. So there are two functional syncytia. One is atrial and other is ventricular. And they are separated by a fibrous ring in between them, that is, which holds the atrioventricular valves, and they are connecting with each other through the AV node and common bundle of His. Now, even if a single atrial muscle fiber is depolarized, the impulse spreads via gap junctions and depolarize all atrial fibers. Now, if the AV conduction system is undamaged, it will spread to ventricles to depolarize it. Now, this principle helps the heart to produce a single forceful coordinated contraction each time. Now, the impulse travels or is conducted in the different portion of the specialized conduction system at different rates. It is the velocity, conduction velocity is highest in the Purkinje fiber and it is least in the AV node. And this allows the efficient utilization of the mechanical efficiency of the heart each time. Now, third property is excitability. The cardiac muscle cell can be excited provided the impulse is having magnitude greater than that of a threshold potential. And then it will bring about the complete action potential. But if the magnitude of the impulse, stimulating impulse, is less than that of the threshold potential, no action potential will result. The fourth property is a refractoriness. The heart muscle will not respond to the external stimuli during the period of its contraction and allow complete emptying of the ventricles prior to the next contraction. Otherwise, there would have been chaos. Now, there are two types of refractory periods. One is absolute refractory period, and second is relative refractory period. We'll understand it by the figure better rather than the direct explanation. Now, you can see this is the phase 4. This is the depolarization phase. This is the early repolarization, plateau phase, and this is the repolarization phase. And again, this is the zero baseline. Now, and this is corresponding cardiac cycle. So in case of the absolute refractory period, you can see the absolute refractory period is from depolarization phase to the end of the plateau phase. So that means and this is a phase of ventricular depolarization till the beginning of the repolarization. This is the T wave, so it's a repolarization. So that means when the ventricles are depolarizing, the muscle cell will not respond to any stimulus. It will say no. Now this is a relative refractory period. During the relative refractory period, the muscle cell can respond if the magnitude of the stimulating impulse is greater, then cell can undergo stimulation or the depolarization. But here during this period, that is when it reaches to the baseline, then or the phase 4, then you can find this is a supranormal period in which the cell is hyperexcitable and can be stimulated even with the stimulus of smaller magnitude. So this is a refractory period. Now, the last most important property is the automaticity, with the help of which the heart functions throughout our life. This is the ability of the heart or ability of the certain tissues in the heart which can discharge spontaneously at regular interval without requiring outside stimulus. And these tissues are called as pacemaker tissues, and which have the ability to discharge spontaneously without needing any external stimulus. Now, in the heart, you'll find the pacemaker tissues are located at certain specific locations. The first is the SA node, then the atrioventricular node or the AV node, and some tissue around the AV node that is called as the junctional tissue. Then the common bundle of his bundle branches, the right and the left branches, and then the Purkinje fibers, that is the His-Purkinje system. And lastly, the ventricular myocardium that can also pace the heart during the time of emergency. Now, these pacemaker tissues have the rate of their rate of discharging varies. It is highest with the SA node, that is 70 to 160 beats per minute, and therefore we say that it is the natural pacemaker of the heart. Then followed by the atrioventricular node, which can pace the heart at 40 to 60 beats per minute, followed by the common bundle of His, which can pace the heart at 15 to 40 beats per minute, and lastly, the ventricular myocardium, as a last ditch effort to sustain the life, can pace the heart at the rate 1 to 15 beats per minute. Now, this is a picture of the ECG papers of different sizes. The ECG paper is available in different sizes, and depending upon the type of machine you are using, which type, 1 channel, 3 channel, 6 channel, 12 channel, the size of the ECG paper roll varies. And it is available as 20 to 30 meter rolls, or even available as Z-fold papers. Now, irrespective of the size of the ECG paper, the basic structure of, if you observe the ECG paper, basically it is like a graph paper. And the smallest unit on the ECG paper corresponds to a small cube of 1 millimeter in width and 1 millimeter in height. So it is a 1 cube of 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. Now, when the ECG paper is mounted on the machine is primed for 2 speeds. One is 25 millimeter per second and another is 50 millimeters per second. So when the machine runs the ECG roll, ECG paper at 25 millimeter per second, it will run 1500 cubes in a minute. So therefore, width of each cube will be 0.04 seconds. So that means the machine runs along the x-axis. So the width of each cube will be 0.04 second. And if it runs at 50 millimeter per second, the width of each cube will be 60 divided by 3000, that is 0.02 seconds. So the width of each cube will be 0.02 seconds. So whenever you are when the complexes are plotted, when the complexes are recorded on the ECG roll paper, along the width or along the x-axis, will be measuring the width of the complexes, and that will be measured in seconds. Now, similarly, the machine is adjusted in such a way that 1 millivolt current produced will give you 10 mm deflection, and that deflection or the height of the complexes is measured along the y-axis. So whenever we are measuring the width of the complexes, it is expressed in seconds, and height of the complexes, which is measured along the y-axis, is measured in millivolt. Whenever we are recording the ECG of the patient or of a dog, it is advisable to record all the 6 leads, 1, 2, 3, AVR, AVL, AVF, with 25 millimeter speed, with about 6 to 8 QRS complexes in each lead. And lastly, again, change the speed of the machine to 50 millimeter per second and record only lead 2 with about 12 to 15 QRS complexes, so that those will be utilized for calculation purposes. Because canine heart runs at a very high speed, and therefore we have, for calculation purposes, it should not strain your eyes for calculating 0.04 seconds a cube and 0.02 seconds a cube. So that magnifies the image if you record it at 50 millimeter per second speed. It is just a what you say, it is just a ease of calculation. Now we come to the cardiac conduction system. Now this brings about the coordinated forceful contraction of the heart in an orderly manner. It consists of specialized tissues that conduct the electrical impulse through the heart. The impulse is carried rapidly through the atrial and ventricular syncytium, as we have discussed earlier, and produce a coordinated forceful contraction. The impulse is produced at the SA node. Where the SA node is situated, it is situated in the right atrium, at the junction of the right atrium and cranial vena cava in dog. Now, it is a natural pacemaker of the heart. Now, once the impulse is fired by the SA node is situated in the right atrium, and so therefore the impulse will spread through the intra-atrial pathways to the left atrium and through the internodal pathways to the AV node at the speed of 500 millimeter per second. And therefore, since the SA node is situated in the right atrium will depolarize 0.01 second earlier as compared to that of the left atrium. And now impulse will travel at the speed of 500 millimeter through these pathways and bring about the depolarization of both the atria. And this will produce the electrical current, which will be shown on the ECG in the form of a P wave. So the P wave is formed because of both the atrial excitation. And now since the right atrial depolarization occurs 0.01 second earlier, first half of the P wave will be because of the right atrium and latter half will be because of the left atrium. So the atrial excitation will produce you the P wave on the ECG, and the first half being produced because of the right atrium and second half because of the left atrium. Now, once the impulse reaches the AV node, the speed of the impulse is brought down to 100 millimeter per second. Now, this delay in the impulse conduction allows sufficient time to the atria for discharging their blood complements into the ventricles. And as a result of which you'll find there is no electrical activity during this phase of transit of impulse through the AV node, and therefore we'll find that it is an isoelectric phase and seen only as a straight line on the ECG. So you see, this is a straight line, which what you see as a when the impulse passes through the AV node, and this is called as the PR interval, or it is also sometimes some books also describe it as PQ interval. So PR interval is only a transit time, or it's a delay of the impulse conduction through the AV node. Now, once the impulse crosses the AV node, it will come to the common bundle of phase, and from there, the impulse will rapidly travel at the speed of 2000 millimeter per second through the His-Purkinje system up to the through the bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers, and bring about the depolarization of the entire ventricular myocardium. Now, the ventricular depolarization takes place in 3 phases. The first phase is during the first phase of ventricular depolarization, there is a depolarization of the mid and apical portion of the ventricular septum of both the ventricles, and therefore this will bring about a first negative deflection after the Q wave. So the first deflection after the PR segment, that is called as the Q wave. So Q wave is a first negative deflection formed because of the mid and because of the depolarization of the mid and apical portion of the interventricular septum. Now, after this, the impulse will rapidly travel through the Purkinje fibers and will bring about the depolarization of the complete ventricular mass. Now, both the ventricles, left and the right, they will depolarize almost simultaneously, producing there is a exchange of large amount of the electrical flux, which will be reflected on the ECG in the form of a large positive deflection, that is a R wave. Now, both the ventricles, they will depolarize simultaneously, but the machine will record only the electrical forces produced by the left ventricle because they are greater in magnitude. Because left ventricular mass is 2 to 3 times thicker as compared with the right ventricle. So the depolarization of the entire ventricular mass will bring about the big positive deflection in the ECG. That is the first positive deflection after the Q wave, and that is the formation of the R wave. Now, lastly, the mid and apical portion of the interventricular septum is depolarized. The entire ventricular mass is depolarized. Now, what remains only the base of the septum of both the ventricles remains to get depolarized, and that get depolarized here in the third phase of depolarization, giving again a negative deflection after the R wave, and that is nothing but the formation of the S wave. Thus, QRS complex is formed. And now, so here you can see this is the base of the interventricular septum that gets depolarized and forming the positive and negative deflection after the R wave, that is the S wave. And lastly, it's the T wave is formed because it's at the end of the last phase of ventricular repolarization. In dogs, T waves may be positive, negative, or biphasic. Very few restrictions are placed on the T wave in the canine electrocardiogram for the T wave, but its amplitude should not be greater than 25% of the R wave. So the ventricular repolarization will lead to the formation of the P wave, because during repolarization also there is a involvement of electrical activity. The flux will be produced and reflected on the ECG in the form of the formation of the T wave. Thus, the PQRST complexes are formed. Now, let us measure these complexes and try to gain some information, because these complexes, when they are measured, they are going to give us the concrete information regarding the cardiac health of the patient. Now, this is the P wave. P wave has the width and the amplitude. There are 2 measurements. Then PR segment, this PR interval. PR interval, as we know, it's the impulse traveling is isoelectric phase, so it has only the width. Then this is a PR segment, this portion. Just remember this. I'll show you its interpretation during the discussion our lecture. So, but this is the PR interval. Then QRS complexes, there are two measurements which are placed on it: the width of the QRS complex and the amplitude or the height of the QRS complex. Then there is a ST segment. ST segment starts with the end of the depolarization, ventricular depolarization, and the beginning of the ventricular repolarization. So this is a ST segment. This segment can move upward, or generally it lies along the baseline, but it can move upward or downward. That is called as the elevation or depression, and that has to be studied. What are its implications and interpretation? We'll again study when we discuss further. Then there is a QT interval. QT interval is a summation of total ventricular activity, that is depolarization plus repolarization. So these are the sum of the measurements. And lastly is the RR interval. RR interval is the interval between the two R waves. It gives us information regarding two factors. When the RR interval between the is exactly the same for all complexes in the rhythm strip, we say the rhythm is absolutely normal sinus rhythm. But even there is a slight variation in the rhythm, the RR interval, we say there is a sinus arrhythmia. So RR interval gives us an idea regarding whether there is a normal sinus rhythm or there is a sinus arrhythmia. Similarly, 3000 divided by RR interval will give you the heart rate of the patient. Just on standing also you can calculate that. Now, whenever I will be speaking the figures, those will be always with the default measurement of my ECG at 50 millimeter per second. Now, just to summarize the ECG segment and the cardiac cycle event, P wave is atrial depolarization. PR interval is impulse delay through the AV node. QRS complex, ventricular depolarization. QT interval, total ventricular activity, depolarization plus repolarization. Then ST segment, isoelectric section between the ventricular depolarization and repolarization. And T wave is nothing but it is a ventricular repolarization. Now, we'll start with morphological alterations of the first waveform, that is the P wave. Normally, P wave normally the right atrium depolarizes 0.01 second earlier than the left atrium, and then followed by the left atrium producing the P wave on the ECG. Therefore, the first half of the P wave is due to the right atrium and remaining half is due to the left atrium. In the dog, the normal P wave has its width. There are two measurements, its width and the amplitude. The width should not be more than 0.04 seconds or 2 blocks. Should not be wider than 2 blocks. And the amplitude should not be more than 0.4 millivolt or should not be more than 4 blocks. Now, if left atrium enlarges, what will happen to the P wave? Now, when the left atrium will enlarge, firstly, the first half of the P wave, which is formed due to the right atrium, will depolarize normally. But when the second half, when the left atrium, since it is prolonged, the impulse will take little longer time to travel through the lengthened fibers of the left atrium. And this delay in the traveling of the impulse will be reflected in the ECG in the form of wide P waves. Now, if you see here, this is a normal P wave that would have formed, but what happens? The right atrial depolarization is normal, but the left atrial depolarization, since the fibers are lengthened, it takes extra time to travel through, and therefore you'll find the P wave will be widened. So the wide P waves indicate when the P waves are wider than 0.04 seconds or more than 2 blocks, we say there is a left atrial enlargement. At the same time, you can see when the P waves they widen, there will be notching of the P waves. So notching of the P waves, and when the P waves are wide, we say there is a left atrial enlargement. It is also designated as P mitral. When you say P mitral, it's a wide P wave, because normally mitral valve issues like mitral regurgitation or mitral stenosis, they are responsible for the left atrial enlargement. So the wide P waves signify left atrial enlargement. Now suppose in this particular ECG, if you calculate the P waves, they are 3 block wide, that is 0.06 seconds. So it is a case of left atrial enlargement. Now what will happen if there is a right atrial enlargement? Now in the right atrial enlargement, as we know, the pacemaker SA node is situated in the right atrium, and therefore it will depolarize 0.01 second earlier. But this advantage of depolarizing 0.01 second earlier will be lost, because the right impulse has to travel that extra time extra time because of the added length, the lengthened length of the right atrial fibers. And therefore, when they reach to the left atrium, the depolarization of the left and the right and the left atrium will occur simultaneously. And therefore, the electrical flux produced will be added together, which will be reflected on the ECG in the form of a tall P wave. Therefore, whenever there is a right atrial enlargement, the P wave will become tall. So the P wave will be taller than 0.4 millivolt. Now, this is also designated as the P pulmonale, because the diseases of the lungs, generally pulmonary diseases, are the cause of right atrial enlargement. So whenever there is a right atrial enlargement, the P waves will become tall. Whenever there is a left atrial enlargement, P wave will become wide. Now here in this particular case, you can find the P waves are taller than 0.8. They are almost taller than, they are as tall as the 8 blocks. So 0.8 millivolt. So this is a case of right atrial enlargement. Now I told you to just remember the PR segment. This is PR interval, remember, but this is PR segment. This PR segment, whenever there is a right atrial enlargement, the PR segment hangs down, or this is called as the sagging. And this is designated as TA wave. That is a capital T small a wave, TA wave. And this is again an indication of right atrial. Whenever there is a right atrial enlargement, you'll find there is a sagging of the PR segment. Here you can see the arrow shows you the sagging of the PR segment or the TA wave. Now, the P waves can be wide. Also, there can be a left atrial enlargement and right atrial enlargement. So the P waves can be wide and tall. So in this particular case, now if you observe, the P waves are wide also, the P waves are tall also. So in this case, you will find in this ECG, there is a biatrial enlargement. Both the atria are enlarged. So it's a case of biatrial enlargement. Plus you can see there is a sagging of the PR segment, that is called as the TA wave. So the P waves can be wide, P waves can be tall, and there can be the biatrial enlargement with wide and tall P waves. Now there can be a change in the amplitude of the P wave. This change in the amplitude of the P wave, it is called as wandering pacemaker. Now this shift, this is because the pacemaker shifts between SA node to AV node, secondary to the vagal influence, and therefore there is a change in the height of the P waves. And therefore, because of the shifting of the pacemaker from SA node to AV node, in the rhythm strip, you may see some of the P waves of normal size, small, some may be biphasic, or even negative when the impulse totally goes to the AV node or to the junctional tissue. Now, in case of the dogs, the increase or decrease vagal tone is responsible for producing such variations in the cardiac rhythm. And these are also classified as vagal arrhythmias. Now, these vagal arrhythmias include normal sinus rhythm, wandering pacemaker, respiratory sinus arrhythmia, sinus arrest, or sinus block. These vagal arrhythmias are a normal variation of canine cardiac rhythm and doesn't require any treatment, normal usually. Now, the normal sinus rhythm signifies that all the RR interval in all the R complexes or the RR interval for all the QRS complexes in the rhythm strip is exactly the same. Even if there is slightest variation, there is a sinus arrhythmia. Now, when we say word sinus, that means the P waves are visible. The impulse is produced, that means the sinus node is having the rhythm in its control. So, and whether there is a slight variation in the RR interval, it's a sinus arrhythmia. In this particular ECG, you can see the RR interval varies. So here we say there is a sinus arrhythmia. At the same time, you can see the amplitude of the P wave is also changing. So there is a wandering pacemaker that also exists. Now in this particular ECG, we have seen that the pacemaker starts shifting from SA node to AV node, and therefore you can see the change in amplitude of the P waves. They become smaller and smaller and smaller. At this point, they become biphasic P wave, and here it becomes totally negative. That means here the impulse has shifted totally to the AV node or to the junctional tissue. And therefore, from here onwards, the rhythm is not sinus, but it is classified as the junctional rhythm. So the P waves can be negative because of the when the impulse reaches to the AV node. Now, respiratory sinus arrhythmia. What is it? It is a benign normal variation in heart rate that occurs during each breathing cycle. The heart rate increases during inspiration and decreases while expiration. Now, during inspiration, what happens? That increases the heart rate. The intrathoracic pressure lowers due to the contraction and lowering caudally of the diaphragm and thoracic expansion. And atrial pressure is also lowered. As a result, there is an increased blood flow to the heart from the lungs, and which in turn triggers the baroreceptors, and that diminishes the vagal tone and increase in the heart rate. While during exhalation, the exactly opposite happens. The diaphragm relaxes, moves forward, reduces the size of the thorax, increases the intrathoracic pressure, activation of baroreceptors, and increase in the vagal tone and reduces the heart rate. If you observe this particular ECG, this is a expiratory phase during which the heart rate is 100 beats per minute, and this is the inspiratory phase during which the heart rate is 150 beats per minute. So now this is during inspiration, the heart rate again decreased. During expiration, again it has decreased, and inspiration it has increased. So this irregularity is occurring at regular interval. Now, since respirations are occurring at regular interval, this irregularity of increase in the heart rate during expiration and decrease in the heart rate during expiration and increase during inspiration occurs at regular interval, and therefore it is classified as regularly irregular arrhythmia. Now, another is sinus arrest and sinoatrial block. This is a temporary cessation of SA node activity for a brief period. It is nothing but the sinus arrest is a pause in sinus rhythm that lasts for a certain period. Now, if it is, if that pause is less than twice the RR interval, it is classified as sinus arrest, and otherwise it is if it is greater than twice RR, it is classified as sinus block. Let us understand it better by the ECG picture. In this particular ECG, you will find these are the two consecutive RR intervals we have marked. Here RR interval is 26 blocks, and here after 41 blocks, the next complex has come. So that means there was a pause for 41 blocks. So now if you calculate 26 2s are 52, so it is less than 2 RR. So this is considered as sinus, it is less severe. So it is considered as sinus arrest. And whereas here in this ECG, the difference is 23 blocks, and then thereafter, after 53 blocks, there is a impulse, next complex has come. So this is 23 to the 46, so it is more than 2 RR interval. Therefore, it is considered as the sinus block. So this is only this only signifies the severity of the sinus pause. It is, if it is less than 2 RR, it is considered as sinus arrest. If it is more than 2 RR, it is considered as sinus block or sinoatrial block. Now, when you see the negative P waves on the ECG, this is generally because of the exaggerated vagal tone, or the pacemaker has shifted to the AV node, and that is why you see the formation of the negative P waves. And this is because when the impulse or when the pacemaker reaches to the AV junction, there will be retrograde depolarization of the atria from AV node to the SA node, and therefore you find the negative P waves on the ECG. And then when it reaches to the junctional tissue, such a rhythm is described as the junctional rhythm and not the sinus rhythm. Now, when you see the negative P waves on the ECG, what conditions you can think of associated with? It can occur with digitalis toxicity. Think whether your patient is on digitalis therapy. It is seen with severe atrioventricular valve insufficiency, vagal hypertonia, and atrial myocarditis. So these conditions you can think of when you see the negative P waves on the ECG. Now this is a ECG showing you the entire rhythm strip is showing you the negative P waves. That means here the rhythm is not sinus, but the pacemaker has totally shifted to the AV node, to the junctional tissue. So the rhythm is junctional. The P waves are always designated as negative P waves. The negative P waves are always designated as P dash. Now that means this is a junctional rhythm. Now, what is the inherent ability of the junctional tissue to pace the heart? It is between 40 to 60 beats per minute, as against the sinus of 70 to 160 beats per minute. And if you calculate the heart rate here, it is about 100 beats per minute. And therefore, you will find, and this is a junctional rhythm, and which has the ability to pace the heart with 40 to 60 beats per minute. And for junctional rhythm, this heart rate is junctional tachycardia. So it is not a, and if you would have auscultated this patient without taking the ECG, what you would have heard is 100 beats. So it is absolutely normal for a dog. And therefore, thus, even if just by recording one ECG, we could not differentiate, there is a change in the rhythm because with the help of the stethoscope. So thus, with the help of the ECG, we can identify and recognize the rhythm, and then the suitable therapy can be instituted wherever it is necessary. Now, P waves can be absent. Yes, there are conditions when the P waves can be seen absent on the rhythm strip. Normally, in the QRST complex, the P wave should be followed by QRS complex, or the QRS complex should be preceded by the P wave. So they have to follow each other in a sequential manner. Now, sometimes it can happen that the P waves are absent. And what is that condition? It is a very serious condition in the dogs, particularly with the atrial enlargements occurring in the dilated cardiomyopathy cases. And particularly in Dobermans or Great Danes, you can see this problem very frequently. It is the case of atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is a reentrant type of arrhythmia in which small reentrant circuits because of the enlargement of the atrial fibers. Those fibers get irritated and they become the ectopic foci, and thousands of these ectopic foci fire the impulse on the SA node. And then because of that, and these are not in an orderly manner. So there is no organized activity at the atria, but it's just a chaotic activity. And many of the impulses, they pass through the QRS complexes, pacing the heart at very high speed. But you will find that because of the chaotic activity at the atria, you will find there is absence of P wave, and you will find the baseline undulations or fasciculation. These are called as the F waves. So absence of P wave and baseline replaced with baseline undulations or fasciculations called as F wave. This is a characteristic feature of atrial fibrillation. So when P waves are absent, you can first think of whether there is a atrial fibrillation. Of course, this has to be correlated with the clinical history of the patient and other diagnostic modalities. Now, this is again a case of atrial fibrillation, showing you the baseline undulations or fasciculations F waves. So the P wave is absent here. Now, P wave can also be absent in the cases of hyperkalemia. There is a characteristic feature in hyperkalemia. As the potassium levels they increase, they pull up the T wave and press the P wave. So the P wave starts flattening and the T wave tenting occurs. So but of course here, if you see the baseline is steady, it's not undulating. So this is a characteristic feature of hyperkalemia, the flattening of the P wave and the tenting or the tall peak T waves which are seen. So by looking at even this ECG, we can suspect that probably the patient could be having the increased levels of potassium, and then you can send the blood sample to the laboratory, causing the you can send the blood to the laboratory for getting it assessed for the potassium level. Of course, again, you have the other history, corroborating history, clinical history of the patient in your hand. So in hyperkalemia, you can see that there is a absence of P waves. Now, morphological alterations in PR interval. So we have seen the morphological alterations of the P waves. Now, morphological alterations in the PR interval. Now, PR interval is an isoelectric phase, and it is inversely proportional to the heart rate. The normal PR interval in the dog is between 0.06 to 0.13 seconds. It shortens with tachycardia and it prolongs with bradycardia. Now, prolongation of the PR interval can occur, and when it is there is a prolongation of the PR interval than the normal, it suggests that there is a delay in the conduction of the impulse through the AV node, and it is classified or designated as first degree heart block. It is a mild degree of conduction interference. So the prolongation of the PR interval beyond the normal limit, it is suggestive of first degree heart block and only suggests the delayed conduction through the AV node. Now, which conditions you can think of when you see there is a prolongation of the PR interval? Firstly, think whether your patient is on digitalis therapy, because this is the very early sign of digitalis toxicity in dogs, prior to your dog showing you the gastrointestinal upsets of digitalis toxicity. So this is a prolongation of the PR interval in a dog with a digitalis therapy is a sign of early sign of digitalis toxicity. Then exaggerated vagal tone. It is also observed in normal dogs. In normal healthy dog also, you may find the PR interval could be slightly prolonged. But of course, if the patient is hale and hearty, normal, there is no need of any interference from our end. Fibrosis of the AV node can also delay the conduction. Now, this particular ECG shows you that the PR interval is prolonged to 0.26 seconds. So this is a prolongation of PR interval, and it is considered as first degree heart block. This is another case of PR prolongation to 0.28 seconds, and this is because of the digitalis toxicity. So this is nothing but the first degree heart block. Now let us see the morphological alterations occurring in the QRS complexes. Normally, two measurements are placed or recorded on QRS complexes. First is the width of the QRS complexes, which is measured from beginning of the Q wave to the end of the S wave. And for a normal dog, the normal QRS complexes should not be wider than 0.5 seconds or 2.5 blocks. And the QRS complexes, if they are wider than 0.05 seconds, it is an indication of left ventricular enlargement. Now, amplitude of the R wave is measured from the baseline to the top of the R wave. The normal amplitude in case of the QRS complex of the dog should not be more than 3 millivolt, and it should not be less than 0.5 millivolt. If the QRS complexes are taller than the 3 millivolt, then it is considered as the left ventricular enlargement. And if they are smaller than 0.5 millivolt in amplitude, they are considered as low amplitude QRS complexes or diminished QRS complexes. Now, why QRS complexes, they become tall and wide? As we know, when myocardial muscle fiber depolarizes, during the process of depolarization, it will produce the electrical current, and the magnitude of that electrical current produced is directly proportional to the width of the fiber and the diameter of the fiber and the length of the fiber. During dilated cardiomyopathy or in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the myocardial fibers, they lengthen, they increase in length, or they thicken in their diameter. And therefore, the electrical current produced by this lengthened or the thickened fibers will be definitely more, because the current produced is directly proportional to the length of the fiber and the width of the fiber. And therefore, this greater amount of current or flux produced will be reflected on the ECG in the form of tall and wide QRS complexes. That is why in dilated cardiomyopathy and in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you get tall and wide QRS complexes. So the QRS complexes taller than 3 millivolt and wider than 2.5 block or 0.06 millivolt, it's an indication of left ventricular enlargement. Now, this is a ECG showing you the normal QRS complexes of a normal size and normal amplitude. Now, if you see this QRS complex, the width is 3.5 block, that is 0.07 seconds, and the amplitude is 3.8 millivolt. So this is a case of left ventricular enlargement, showing you the wide and tall QRS complexes. Now, in this particular ECG, you see the QRS complexes smaller than 0.5 millivolt, and therefore they are called as the low amplitude QRS complexes, or the diminished amplitude or the diminished QRS complexes. Now, what could be the reasons that or the conditions you can think of when you see the low amplitude QRS complexes in the ECG in a patient? First is obesity. Second is pericardial effusion. Third is severe hypothyroidism. Fourth is subcutaneous emphysema. And lastly, the massive myocardial damage, which reduces the myocardial contractility, giving rise to the poor myocardial contractility and the small amplitude QRS complexes. So these are the conditions you can think of when you see the low amplitude QRS complexes. Now, We have seen tall QRS complexes, wide QRS complexes, smaller amplitude QRS complexes. Now QRS complexes can be absent also. Normally, when you see a rhythm strip, you see the PQRST complexes given at regular interval. If you see all the P waves and QRS complexes in the entire rhythm strip, they look alike. And the QRS complexes are given from the P wave at a fixed distance. That means the QRS complexes are related to the P wave. That means, in other words, the PR interval is constant. This is a characteristic feature. And all complexes in the rhythm strip should have a P wave followed by a QRS complex, and they must follow this pattern, and none of them should be absent in the rhythm strip. And they should all look alike. Now, when one or more QRS complex, sometimes it happens in the rhythm strip that after a P wave, you don't see a QRS complex. That means the impulse is not conducted beyond the AV node. So the QRS complex is seen missing in the rhythm strip. Now, this is described as second degree Hart block. Now, sometimes one or two QRS complexes could be absent. Sometimes number of QRS complexes could be seen dropped. And therefore, it is called as the advanced second degree Hart block. And sometimes it can also happen that none of the impulse is conducted beyond the AV node, and you don't see any QRS complex in the rhythm strip, and therefore it is described as third degree AV block or the complete Hart block. So the QRS complex can be seen missing. Now let us see in this particular ECG, all these three complexes, they are having the P wave followed by a QRS complex. But for this QRS complex, after the P wave, the QRS complex is missing. That means the QRS complex is not, the impulse is not conducted beyond the AV node. So this is designated as the second degree Hart block. Now in this particular ECG, you can see the one P wave is conducting the impulse, other is dropping. Again here, one is conducting, other is dropping. That means out of the two P waves, one P wave is not conducted. So this is 2:1 second degree Hart block. Out of two, one is conducting the impulse. So it is 2:1 second degree Hart block. Now in this particular ECG, if you observe, measure the PR interval. The PR interval is almost, it is increased, and therefore you'll find the PR interval is also increased. It is nearly 0.18, and here you can see the impulse is not conducted beyond the AV node. That means QRS complex is missing. So the first degree Hart block, because of the prolongation of the PR interval, there is an existence of the first degree Hart block and the second degree Hart block. So that means it indicates that both the degrees of the Hart block are present here, first and second. They exist simultaneously in the rhythm strip. This is the case of digitalis toxicity. Remember, digitalis can produce any type of arrhythmia that has ever been reported. Now, in this particular ECG, you can see the only P waves in the rhythm strip, and there are no QRS complexes. What you see here are the ventricular premature complexes, because nothing is heard from the higher centers, and therefore ventricles will try to pace the heart, and try to escape the heart from the emergency, and therefore these are nothing but the escape beats and not the regular QRS complexes. Because as per the definition what we have seen, the QRS complex should be related, the P wave and the QRS complexes should be related. So if we consider this is as a QRS complex, then let us see the PR interval here. The PR interval here, then it is reduced. That means here it is further reduced. Here it is still reduced. So here what you see that the PR interval is changing. That means the P waves are not related with the QRS complexes. So this is not a QRS complex, but it is a ventricular premature complex. According to the definition of the Thiele of the ventricular premature complex, the ventricular premature complex is identified by its wide and bizarre appearance, and it is not related with the P wave. We have seen here it is the PR interval is changing. So it is not related with the P wave, but related with a large T wave, which remains on the opposite side of the R wave. So these are the ventricular premature complexes or ventricular escape beats that are dominating the rhythm and try to pace the heart. So this is a case of complete heart block or the third degree heart block. Now, let us check the morphological alterations in the ST segment. The ST segment lies between the end of the S wave and beginning of the T wave. It should run along the baseline and slip into the T wave. So normally, if the ST segment directly slips without straightening into the T wave or slides into the T wave, then it is called as ST slurring or ST coving. And this is an indication of left ventricular enlargement. That is, ST segment directly slides or glides into the T wave without first straightening. So this is termed as ST slurring or ST coving, and it's an indication of left ventricular enlargement. Similarly, it can happen that I told you have to see the elevation and depression of the ST segment. Now, if ST segment consistently lies below the baseline by more than 2 blocks or 0.2 millivolt, then it is described as ST segment depression. Now, the ST segment depression is considered significant only when it is more than 2 blocks. Otherwise, just 1 block ST segment depression is not significant and doesn't carry any meaning. It is just a moment. So this depression should be seen in all the complexes in the rhythm strip. So and same thing holds good for the ST segment elevation also. So the ST segment, if consistently lies below the baseline by more than 2 blocks, it is a ST segment depression. And if it is elevated above the baseline and by more than 1.5 block, then only it is considered as significant ST segment elevation, but should be seen in all the complexes in the rhythm strip. Now, in this particular case, ECG, you can see that this is the ST segment, which directly slides into the T wave before it becomes straightening and then going to the T wave. It directly slides into the T wave, so it is described as ST slurring. Similar, it is here. You can see the ST segment that slides into the T wave, and it is called a ST slurring or ST coving, and it's an indication of left ventricular enlargement. Again, you can see here the ST segment or ST slurring that slurs into the T wave, and this is an indication of left ventricular enlargement. Now, in this particular ECG, you can see the ST segment is significant. This is the baseline. So the ST segment is depressed by more than 5 blocks and consistently seen depression in all the QRS complexes. So this is described as ST segment depression. Now, when you see ST segment depressions, what conditions you can think of that ST segment depression is associated with? It is associated with left ventricular enlargement or left ventricular hypertrophy, myocardial hypoxia, myocarditis, and electrolyte disturbances like hypocalcemia. So you can think of these conditions when you see the ST segment depression. Here again, you can see that there is a significant depression of the ST segment. The arrow shows you the ST segment, and this is the baseline. So you can see there is a depression of the ST segment by more than 2 blocks. So this is a case of ST segment depression. Again, a case of ST segment depression, significant depression more than 5 blocks. Now, in this ECG, you can find that the ST segment is elevated by more than 2 blocks, and this is the baseline. So there is a significant elevation of ST segment above the baseline. Now, whenever you see there is an elevation of the ST segment by 1.5 block or more, then what conditions you can think of that the ST segment elevation could be seen with? These are myocardial hypoxia, myocarditis, and the electrolyte imbalance like hypercalcemia. So these are the conditions in which the ST segment elevation can be seen or associated with. Again, the arrow points out you the ST segment elevation in this particular ECG. Now we come to the morphological alterations in the T wave. Now, very few restrictions they are placed, as we already discussed, on the T wave in canine ECG. The T wave can be positive, negative, or even biphasic. And it should be negative in lead V10. V10 is an exploring lead. What it is, we'll see in our course of discussion. It should be negative in lead V10 in all other breeds of dogs except Chihuahua, in which it is normally positive. Now, T wave should not be larger than 1/4 of the R wave amplitude. But again, this is a judgmental call for the clinician, because what happens sometimes, if the amplitude of the QRS complex is smaller, then the T wave, even though it is of a normal amplitude, it would appear falsely enlarged. So again, it's a judgmental call for the clinician to see the merit of the case and then accordingly interpret. So in this particular case, you can see the QRS complexes are diminished, and therefore the normal size T wave appears falsely enlarged. So here also you can see the falsely enlarged, falsely large appearing T wave because the QRS complex is diminished. Now, T wave abnormality can be noted while observing the patient in anesthesia. Particularly, you have to observe the changes in the polarity of the T wave, and while observing the patient during the level of anesthesia, because myocardium is highly sensitive for its oxygen demand, and therefore whenever the oxygen supply decreases, and then the P wave suddenly starts changing its polarity, or it becomes larger and larger. And this is again indication. This is actually a warning of impending disaster into development of the arrhythmias. And therefore, in such cases, immediately the oxygen levels are upgraded and the anesthesia is lowered down till the T wave stabilizes. So thus the ECG helps us to monitor the patient during the surgical procedures during the anesthesia. Now, T wave changes are also noted during electrolyte disturbance. This is most important because T wave becomes tall and peaked, as we have already seen in hyperkalemia, where we have seen that there is an absence of P wave and the T wave becomes tall and peak or the tented, and they become small and biphasic in hypokalemia. This is most important feature. Now, in this particular case, you see this is a case of hyperkalemia. It's a mild type of hyperkalemia with potassium level between 6.2 milliequivalent. Less than 6.5, it is considered as mild hyperkalemia. 5.5 to 6.5, it's a mild hyperkalemia. So here you can see the presence of P wave, they start flattening, and the T wave, they become tall and peak. That is the tenting of the T wave occurs. So this is a case of hyperkalemia. Now let us see the hyperkalemia and the ECG changes. When you classify the hyperkalemia as mild, that is less than 6.5 milliequivalent, you can see the presence of P wave and tall and tented T waves. When the hyperkalemia is moderate, that is between the 6.5 to 8 milliequivalent, the P waves are totally flattened, absence of P waves, and you will find that there is a ST segment elevation occurs because of the pulling of the T wave. The T wave is pulled upward, and therefore loss of P wave, prolonged and wide QRS complexes, and tenting of the T wave. Now, in case of the severe hyperkalemia, you will find there is total flattening of the P waves, wide QRS complexes, and again the tenting of the T waves. Now, this is just I have observed it, a push and pull effect of hypokalemia and hyperkalemia on the ECG. Now, hypokalemia creates an illusion that there is a T wave it flattens and ST segment is depressed. And because of this, in hypokalemia, the T wave becomes small and biphasic. Whereas in case of the hyperkalemia, the T wave is pulled upwards, as a result of which the P wave flattens and the QRS complexes, they become widen, and T wave, they become narrow in their width, but they become tall and tinting. So this is a push and pull effect of hypokalemia and hyperkalemia. So in hypokalemia, you find a small and biphasic P wave, whereas in case of the hyperkalemia, you get the wide and the tinting of the T waves occur and absence of P waves. This is a hyperkalemia, again mild hyperkalemia, where you can see the tall and picked T waves. Now this is a case of hypokalemia with potassium levels 2.8 milliequivalent per liter, and here you can find the small biphasic T wave, showing you the giving you the early indication of diagnosis that it could be having a hypocalcemia or hypokalemia. Send the blood report to the laboratory until the report comes, and of course with the corroborated with the clinical history of the patient. So ECG gives you a clue regarding to identify the electrolyte imbalances also. Now we come to the QT interval, morphological alterations in the QT interval. QT interval only has a width, and normal QT interval in the dog is between 0.15 to 0.22 seconds. The QT interval is inversely proportional to the heart rate, and it is measured from beginning of the Q wave to the end of the T wave. Now QT interval is prolonged owing to hypocalcemia and in hypokalemia. Certain drugs like antibiotics like macrolides, fluoroquinolones, or antiarrhythmics like amiodarone, sotalol, procainamide, quinidine, they prolong the QT interval. Now QT interval in human beings, there is a syndrome called as long QT syndrome, and during which whenever there is a bradycardia, the QT interval is prolonged, and prolonged in such a way that the QRS complexes, they start twisting around its isoelectric line, producing a polymorphic ventricular tachycardia called as torsades de pointes. And therefore, this is a life-threatening arrhythmia, and therefore, prolongation of the QT interval puts the patient to the risk of ventricular arrhythmia, that is torsades de pointes. And therefore, QT interval is inversely proportional to the heart rate. That is, it prolongs in bradycardia and it gets shortened in tachycardia. And therefore, in human beings, there is always a method to represent the QT interval as corrected QT interval. That is called as the QTC. And this QTC is representing the QT interval because this correction is made so that the effect of the QT interval on the heart rate is nullified, and the QT interval is expressed at the heart rate of 60 beats per minute. And that is done by using the Bazet's formula. Bazet's formula by giving the that is the RR interval divided by the square. The correct observed QT interval divided by the square root of RR interval. Now in veterinary also, the Oliveira et al. In 2014, they have studied the QT interval in veterinary, and they also suggested a formula for the heartbeats at 100 beats per minute for the dogs. Now, in this particular slide, you can see the QT interval is normal. If you measure it, it's 0.20 seconds. So this is a normal QT interval for a dog. And this particular ECG, you can see there is a hypocalcemia, and therefore there is a prolongation of QT interval. It is at 0.28 seconds. So this is a prolongation of QT interval. This is another case of hypocalcemia where you can see the QT interval is at 0.30 seconds. So the hypocalcemia prolongs the QT interval. Now there is a prolongation of QT interval because of the hypokalemia. The small biphasic T wave you can see, and the QT interval measure, it is at 0.28 seconds. So the prolongation of QT interval because of the hypokalemia. Now, unlike bipolar limb lead system that is consisting of leads 1, 2, 3, and unipolar limb lead system, lead AVR, AVL, and AVF, unipolar precordial leads, or which are also called as the exploring leads or the V leads, they are not well developed in veterinary cardiology field, and they have limited applications. And it is not very frequently used in veterinary practice as it is used in humans, that is the leads V1 to V6. Now, unipolar precordial leads, they explore and record the electrical activity from the dorsal and ventral surfaces of the heart. Now, there are 4 recognized precordial leads, and their designations are V10, V2, V4, and V1. And their placement locations are as under. Now, while recording these exploring leads, you have to fix all the 4 limbs with the respective leads, and you have to select the V lead button on the ECG machine, and then record these leads by placing the V electrode or the V lead at these locations. So for recording the V lead, you have to put the you have to place the V lead in between the two center of the 2 scapulae, and that is a location of almost the approximate location of 7 thoracic vertebra. In between the 2 scapulae, the center of the 2 scapulae, you have to place the V lead and then record the lead. That is a V10. Then CV6LL, that is the left side 6th intercostal space at the edge of the sternum, the location. Then CV6LU, left side 6th intercostal space at the costochondral junction. And lastly, CV5RL, that is on the right side 5th intercostal space at the edge of the sternum. So these are the 4 locations at which the V leads are recorded in dogs, and these are their respective placements for recording these particular leads. Now, so far we have seen all the criteria, morphological alterations indicating the left ventricular enlargement, but the right ventricle also enlarges. So what are those criteria or morphological alterations those take place which signify the right ventricular enlargement? And these are the criteria which indicate that you can identify the right ventricular enlargement if the following criteria they are fulfilled. First is S1, S2, S3 pattern. Then deep Q wave in lead 2, 3, and AVF. Deep S wave in lead V4, that is CV6LU. And lastly, the T positive wave in lead V10. The T wave should always be negative, remember, in all the dogs except Chihuahua. But in case of the Chihuahua, it is always the opposite. So therefore, the T wave, if it is positive, it's an indication of right ventricular enlargement. So now first, let us see what is this S1, S2, S3 pattern. Now, if there are S waves in lead 1, lead 2, and lead 3, that means presence of S wave in lead 1, 2, and 3, it's an indication of right ventricular enlargement. Why? Because S wave generally is not seen in lead 1. It may be variably present in lead 2 and often present in lead 3. That is why when all these 3 leads, they show the presence of the S wave, it's described as S1, S2, S3 pattern, and it is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. In this particular ECG strip, you can see the lead 1 is showing you the S wave, lead 2 S wave, and lead 3 S wave. So S1, S2, S3 pattern is seen, and therefore it's an indication of right ventricular enlargement. Now, second criteria is deep Q wave in lead 2, 3, and AVF. If the Q waves deeper than 0.5 millivolt in lead 2, 3, and AVF, it is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. Again, here it is a judgmental call for the clinician because it is breed best. If particularly the thin and deep chested breeds, they already have the deeper Q waves, and therefore again it's a judgmental call for the clinician to decide. So presence of deep Q waves deeper than 0.5 millivolt in lead 2, 3, and AVF is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. So in this particular, these three leads, lead 2, 3, and AVF, you can see the deep Q waves more than 0.5 millivolt. So it is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. The deep S wave in lead V4, the S wave deeper than 0.7 millivolt in lead V4 is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. Now, this is the lead CV6LU or the V4, in which you can see the deep S wave deeper than 0.7 millivolt. So it's a suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. And so finally, the last criteria to diagnose right ventricular enlargement is positive T wave in lead V10. Now, T wave is usually negative in all the breeds of the dogs. In lead V10, it is always T wave is negative, except Chihuahua, in which it is normally positive. So if you observe the T wave positive in other breeds of the dogs, it is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. So now here you can see this is the T wave. This is a recording of the lead V10, and you can see the T wave as negative. So this is normal feature in all the dogs except for Chihuahua. But if you observe the T wave positive in lead V10, it is suggestive of right ventricular enlargement. So friends, so far we have seen the morphological alterations in the dog, morphological alterations in the waveforms of the dog, and which can give you the indication, or in other words, you can say that just observing this and measuring this, interpreting these waveforms properly, the ECG rhythm strip can speak with you and can give you the clue regarding what is going wrong with the heart of the dog. So interpretation of the ECG, whenever you are doing, always do it from left to right. Do not do haphazardly in between, even if you observe some abnormality, but always have a complete look at the ECG rhythm strip from left to the right, and do not miss anything so that you don't miss the diagnosis. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir. I think only a few questions are seen in the chat box and the question answer section. Somebody has asked about, sir, regarding the pacemaker implantation.
Yes, pacemaker implantation is a therapy given for the third-degree heart block. And pacemakers are available abroad. The pacemaker implantations can be done, but generally the pacemakers of human beings who have died, those are recovered and they can be used but it's a very costly therapy, and it is generally given in the pocket or in the subcutaneous tissue, and then that it can give you it can pace the heart at about 70 to as per the pulsation rate. But it generally costs, it's quite dear, I think costing you nearly $5,000 for the cost of the pacemaker and plus the surgical treatment.
Yes, sir. Somebody has asked regarding the best cardiology book for the beginners.
There are 2 cardiology books. I'll show you on my presentation also so that you can write it down. One is a Bible of ECG, that is the Tillet, and second is by the Bolton. Bolton is comparatively easy. See, all these books, they have taken a reference from the Tillet. So that is, I say it's a Gita or the Bible of the ECG for the dogs and cats. But Bolton is comparatively easy to understand the concepts.
Yes, sir.
I can just share my presentation. One second,
sir.
And I'll give you the reference.
Yes, sir.
Here you can note down the Bolton and the Tillet, LP Tillet. This is the first book by Bolton and the Tillet. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Though it is not visible, we will convey the through your mail.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much.